Welcome back to the Unclassified Podcast with your hosts, Preston Stewart and Ben Wheeler. We are going to talk about Venezuela. We're going to talk about the Department of War and the new Secretary of War, as well as the shameful National Defense Review, the Legion of Doom, Chicago v. Texas, and then we, of course, as we do every week, well, most weeks, we have your questions. But, Preston, last week you put a fatwa on Doug the Pug.
It's true.
And now, I don't know if you watched the Cowboys-Eagles game. My
Just
birds
the first
were
half,
out there.
yeah.
Birds were out there, tore it up. But you should have seen Doug the Pug was in a Geico commercial. Nationwide.
So that means, all right, it's not a targeted operation. They're not just kind of geolocating footage here for Army football in Tennessee.
No,
They
it's
pushed this
100%
thing national. Yeah. I don't know if that feels better or worse.
Look, a pug is like barely even a living thing. It's like the sponge of dogs, okay? And the fact that they're putting them everywhere does feel like an attack. But also, I think, if anything, Preston, everyone's making fun of you for losing to the pug.
Yeah, I know.
Which is the sponge of dogs. But I think what you should do, you should be blaming them.
I thought you were going to say Mass report his account and try to get it taken down.
Oh, no. We don't want to start that fight. Now, because dog people are crazy. No offense.
See that done sometimes. I see that that's a thing that can be done. Okay.
Well,
not here.
Look, I think if we had won this contest, you'd be on a Geico commercial. And instead, we're here back on this podcast.
Do you think that's what the prize was? National Geico commercials?
The Geico commercial. I mean, come on. So no one knew who Doug the Pug was until he won this contest. And we're going to look into it. I mean, the Tennessean is a shameful fake news newspaper. It used to be reputable, and now it's run by woke, terrible establishment
losing subscribers. Yep, they're losing subscribers.
Yeah.
Nobody.
They are. No one reads it anymore. They filed for Chapter 11. So, anyways, Preston.
Gross.
On a more serious matter, are we going to war?
Yeah. Well, we were there. So this is a wild one. Look, I know my prediction last week of something crazy happening over the weekend fell flat. I'm man enough to admit that. Had a gut feeling. The gut feeling was wrong. Nothing really. I mean, we thought for like 48 hours the president might be dead or something. So like that, there was that possibility back of mind. Could have been pretty serious. But nothing really happened. I even extended the deadline unilaterally to Monday because it was a long weekend, and I thought I need a little help here. Still nothing. Now it's happening. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a week early, but we are definitely about to do more with Venezuela. We've seen in the last couple days. I mean, if you just follow the timeline of how this has transpired too, but we went from there's been a contentious relationship between the United States and Venezuela for a long time, certainly under Maduro, and it's not changed. Then a few weeks ago, the DOJ increased the reward for any information leading to Maduro's arrest to $50 million. There's a shot across the bow. Then we labeled Tren de Aragua a foreign terror organization. There's another move. Then you started hearing U.S. administration officials stop referring to Maduro as the president of Venezuela and started very deliberately talking about him being an illegitimate president, a narco-trafficking kingpin, terrorist leader. That's like, look, maybe this is the boring side of things, but that messaging is deliberate. It's very intentional. And we started to see that shift. Then we get the deployment of a pretty significant U.S. Navy contingent moving south and Marines. Then we've got the strike against the cartels. There was a lethal strike that, according to President Trump, 11 people were killed, trafficking drugs on their way to the United States. There's a lot of questions about that, to be honest, regardless of whether you think it was the right move, the wrong move, that it's a good direction for us to be heading in, legal, illegal, all those things. It's hard to understand how there were 11 people in that boat. And talking with some folks that are a little deeper in the space, they said 11 is an unusual number because, weight is a concern if you're moving product. And for every person, that means less product. So he said, that's 11's a lot. Usually they see 2 or 3, but this boat already, looking at some of the imagery, there were clearly more than 2 or 3. So that raises the question of, were there multiple strikes? Because it's I don't know that you can get to 11 people in that one boat. So if we think the 11 number is correct, that's been repeated over and over again, maybe that means we hit other craft. Rubio has suggested that these strikes are going to continue. And we heard Seb Gorka, the White House counterterrorism lead, a couple days ago say we have declared war on the cartels. We heard Secretary Rubio saying the president is executing a war against the cartels. The language has changed pretty significantly. So, yes, Congress still needs to declare war. I think that's the way we do things. We have not done it that way in a long time. But the very deliberate change from this is a counter-terror operation, counter-narcotics operation, we quickly slid into actually it's counterterrorism, and now it's war. You can't write that off. I had an old boss in the Army that used to say this in a very demeaning way, but words mean things, and they're choosing these words. And I think we have to hear what they're saying and understand what that means. Yesterday, we heard that 10 F-35 stealth fighters were deployed to Puerto Rico. Those aren't needed to go after cartels, but they do have an intelligence gathering capability. It's still a lot, man. We're putting a lot of military resources in the South in what historically has been more of a legal operation. So it's changed, and it feels like everything is lining up. And to be interested in your take here, but it seems like the strike was very politically popular. And if that's the case, it probably opens the door for more actions like that to play out while we have the assets on station.
So I don't know if it was popular or not. I don't really have, I have access to Twitter, but Twitter's not real life, right? If you have to be a real sicko to be on Twitter still. So,
It's a rough field out there, yeah.
It is. So, if you're on Twitter, you go 1 to 2, either liked it or you didn't like it. I'd be interested to see polling on it. A lot of the strike on Venezuela was, in U.S. news at least, buried, from 100%. What I saw, by everything else going on. By Trump dying and coming back to life, by, the National Guard threats, the economy. It was kind of buried. It would not surprise me if this has not sunk through to, I don't want to say normies because it sounds rude, but to people who don't follow the news every day, right? Who maybe just turn on the nightly news, 2 times a week, or they catch it randomly. So I don't know. I would like to see. But it is interesting they're using the word war. I'm not sure if they have an author, because, you're right, we haven't declared war in a while, but we do have authorizations of military force, right? Do they have one that applies to this? I know that as of yesterday, they still had not figured out the legal authority in which they conducted these strikes on the narcotics boat. Because this is a criminal issue, not a terrorist one, right? And any other time you would just arrested them once they arrived to the coast of Florida or wherever they're supposedly going. Do we know what authorization of force they used or what law? Because it seems like they don't even know.
This has been an interesting thing to follow, and it's where I think you can see that this is politically popular. The reason I say that is we have seen now, at least I've seen, from the administration, Secretary Rubio, the Vice President, and Secretary Hegseth ask that question: what legal authority did you conduct this strike under? And in each case, they did not point to a statute or historical precedent or legal authority. They pointed to, these are terrorist cartel members bringing drugs to the United States. So they're making a play on emotions, and that play works, man. That lands. They're in a sense shifting the conversation from the legality to, are you really going to stand up for narco traffickers? And the answer is, for most people, no. Now, which is why I think it's politically popular, because the conversation so quickly shifts there, and the legal question around the strike is boring and, to be honest, confusing, because for our entire adult life, we've been carrying out drone strikes around the world with no due process, right? We sling hellfires into Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, all over the world, mostly the Middle East, every day. We just killed some guys in Syria like last week. And it doesn't, the question of the legality of that is long gone. And I would argue technically we probably still need to dig into just how far this authorization for the use of military force carries out. Like, is this just indefinite? And like 60 years from now, a president can be like, oh, wait, terrorist, kill him. Because that's probably not what we intended back in 2001. I think it was 2001 when this went into effect. So I think the legal debate is boring and getting blown over. And it strikes me very similar to, forgive me if I mentioned this last week, but it strikes me very similar to the bin Laden raid in 2011, where we flew special operations forces into a sovereign country, killed some people, and then left. But the conversation about, was that okay? Like, can we just do that? Was completely glossed over by the fact that we got bin Laden. So, like, who is going to take that win and say, wait a second, should we have done that? Is it okay? Did we mess up some sort of relationship with Pakistan? Is this throwing norms out the window? No, man, bin Laden's dead. So it was politically viable enough and popular enough to completely overshadow. And I think that's where this is right now.
I think it's different though, right? Because bin Laden was an enemy combatant that we were at war with.
I'm talking about more the conversation of legal versus not, rather than,
right.
Yes, like he would have fallen under,
yeah,
the AUMF, but just in terms of public discourse.
I could be mistaken, and it's been a while since I've global war on terrored. But I think the countries have to be designated by Congress to authorize strikes. Because just naming someone a foreign terrorist organization doesn't allow you to drone strike them.
Right. That part is correct. And that's where we've seen some of the pushback. And this is the slippery slope argument. Yeah. I got it. But the one of the concerns there is if you can just name someone a foreign terror organization, and that opens up the ability to drone strike them wherever they are, there's a 1-2 process there that I don't think most of us would like. It's hard to argue in times like this because, again, there's very few Americans that are going to say, actually, those narco traffickers are good dudes. And we've seen that there's not been a lot of action like this taken in recent years. But that's the concern, is if you just throw that label on someone and then start carrying out strikes, start killing them, that's probably not the direction we want this to go. And let me mention a point from Rand Paul yesterday. You and I were texting about this. He went on Newsmax and I think raised a really good point around just how we should think about this, which is if that group of individuals made it to the coast of Florida, we would have arrested them. Now, you can argue whether or not that is sustainable. Marco Rubio has made the point that they expect that to a degree, so it doesn't really deter them at all. But if they made it and had not been spotted, they would have been arrested had they been caught. But for some reason, when they're just off the coast of Venezuela, we kill them. That is hard to square, if we're being honest. That there we kill, here we arrest. For the exact same crime. The exact same crime playing out at the exact same time. I think if we're being honest, that's difficult to wrap our head around. That is hard to connect the dots on that.
Oh, I fully agree. I think the biggest risk here, because you're right, they can just name anyone a foreign terrorist organization and then all of a sudden drone strike them, right? As you're saying here. I worry with these cartel strikes, we're going to get another Anwar al-Awlaki, who, don't get me wrong, deserved every single inch of that Hellfire missile. But he was a U.S. citizen, right? And they drone striked him, and he didn't have a trial. And there was never there was supposedly a legal rationale offered, and Congress accepted it. But there was never any real resolution on there. And I do think one of the reasons that we have not gone after the cartels like this before is because there are U.S. citizens in the cartels. That's always been the most uncomfortable thing with the cartels, and most fentanyl trafficked into the United States, even though they don't like to say this, 98% of it does come from Americans. So are you going to, eventually they are going to kill Americans. Are they going to do drone strikes in U.S. soil? I mean, how far is this, I'll say a forever war going to go on? It's all very dodgy, right? It seems like there's no real end goal or clearly laid out objectives here.
And this is where I'll stick with the reason I think it's going to continue is I believe that it is politically popular because we are not seeing anybody in the U.S. really stand up to say, no, we shouldn't do this. I mean, Rand Paul, but also keep in mind, I like the statements he made. I think he is principled in this regard. But people have also heard him making this argument now for how many years, right? It's the same thing, and nothing has ever changed. So we're not seeing like Congress come together on either side of the aisle. Even Democrats are not standing up, pushing back against this. And I think you asked about the polling if we went out there. Well, I think a lot depends how you ask that question. Is the question, do you think we should be able to execute foreigners in international waters? The answer is probably no. But if you say, are you okay with the United States killing narco traffickers bringing drugs to the United States? My guess is you're like over 80% yes. Like that is it. And that's where I've seen a lot of this devolve recently into three different categories, which is we're talking about the legal aspect, which it's boring, I got it, but I do think that's still important. But then you have the effectiveness and the justification piece as well. What we've seen our leadership recently argue is they've moved away from the legal thing, and they've talked about how this is sending a signal. It's effective. Marco Rubio. We sometimes arrest them and they don't get charged, and they just account for loss, so it doesn't do anything. Now they're dead at the bottom of the ocean. That shipment is blown up. It's effective. I don't think anybody can argue that this was somehow less effective in this singular instance than arresting these guys when they came to shore. The other argument is justified, and that's where you end up with, I think it was Gorka or Hegseth yesterday talking about the number of Americans who have died from drug overdoses over the years. And you compare that with a couple traffickers getting killed. You go, got it, justified. Yes, these are bad, assuming that who was in that boat is who they say was in that boat. They were bad people doing bad things that were doing harm to Americans. Justified. So those arguments are easy to make, but I feel like right now we're having those arguments and discussions in lieu of the legal question of can we do this? Should we do this?
I fully agree, and I think they think the same way. I think they are saying themselves, the legal thing's boring, nobody cares. But the whole basis for the U.S. drone program has always been the legality of it. Every time, I remember growing up throughout all high school, when Obama was, the drone king, drone strike happens, and then they would immediately cite, the justification and what evidence, not necessarily all the evidence, but some that led them to conclude that this drone strike had to happen, right? And that was also during a period in which we were not doing such a great job. Like, they blew up that wedding in Yemen and that hospital in Afghanistan. So, there was a very big concentration on it. But if they just ignore the legality of it, it's hard to see, pains me to say this, it's hard to see how the United States is not acting like a rogue nation, right? If you're not going to state the legality that you're just executing random people for. Right? I mean, do you agree with that, or do you think maybe that's too hyperbolic?
I think that's the natural progression of this conversation. And look, if the first drone strike here had been in Arizona against U.S. citizens ferrying drugs across the border, it would be a different conversation. Like, they're not stupid. No, for all of these strikes going back, like, anytime that, for any administration, anytime they push the envelope a little bit, there's always this easy justification on the other side of like, yeah, dude was a terrorist. I got it. Like, we're kind of, should we be authorized bin Laden in Pakistan again, right? Like, should we be flying special operations forces to conduct ground raids in an allied country? Mm-hmm. Well, it was bin Laden. So who cares? Like, that justifies it. I just feel like, yeah. They're very smart in how this is done.
Rand Paul, no, he's not your senator, but he's the one to seat above you. Yeah. It is interesting. When I was talking about, 5 minutes ago when I mentioned the drone wars growing up, I remember Rand Paul and his dad, Ron Paul, very principled in their opposition to the drones, right? Always opposed to it. But you know who else was opposed to the drones? Ted Cruz. And he filibustered one night. I remember it. He filibustered. He read Green Eggs and Ham, and he was filibustering the national, the NDAA, whatever that stands for, the National Defense Authorization Act they do every year. Because they wanted to give access. The Obama administration wanted to allow drones to fly over U.S. airspace in case they needed to conduct a preemptive self-defense strike in the United States, or something like that. That's how Ted Cruz framed it. Okay, and he filibustered and filibustered and filibustered, and then he won, and they withdrew it. Now this guy's making the rounds, Fox News, everything, saying these are terrorists. We have to kill them. We don't have any time for discussion. And it also isn't helpful that the War Department and Trump are saying that they don't have to brief Congress. They can't brief Congress on this operation that's going on. I don't think that's how it works, actually.
A lot of how I look at some of this, and this is something that's been in my mind since I started making content in this space, is thinking back to 2002, 2003, when the case was being built to go to war in Iraq. And that's scary to me, that there can be falsified intelligence or exaggerated intelligence or just outright lies, right? Whichever route you go down in that regard. And I wonder if that could happen today, or what that would have to look like today. And I think that it has a lower likelihood of happening because there's so many other places you can get information and a lot of opportunity for people to push back and say, that's not true. Here's what's actually happening. I think. It's not as much of a...
They actually, I feel like with Iraq, they actually tried to lie, you know?
What do you mean?
They did send Colin Powell up there to be lie through his teeth to the UN.
Yeah.
And they did go out in the Sunday shows, and they were feeding fake intelligence to New York Times reporters. They're not even doing that. It's just I don't know, Trump wants to bomb Venezuela.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that's been in my mind and kind of shaped a lot of how I view this stuff. So it's whether or not the American people want an invasion of Venezuela or killing traffickers off their coast, I wish we had the conversation about it. Because to your point, it's not hitting the news at all. And I don't like that. It's not that I'm totally opposed to military intervention abroad or taking out bad leaders or intervening in certain aspects outside of U.S. borders to help make our country safe. I really don't like that we just don't have that conversation anymore at the policy level. And it makes me nervous that it just happens and all of a sudden we're there. And I think generally that has worked out okay in the sense that we haven't accidentally stumbled into a new war that is really, really damaging for the United States. But that's always back of mind, is what if we get out over our skis a little bit too far here in Venezuela and they shoot down one of our manned aircraft, or they fire drones at our ships out at sea? We just assume all of this stuff comes without risk, but there is risk to all of it. And
No, I agree with you. Congress needs to, when this is all said and done, and maybe they'll do it in 2027, or maybe it'll have to be done in 2032 or whatever, but they need to strip the executive branch of their ability to wage war without consent to Congress. And the whole reason they even have this authority is after 9/11, everyone freaks out, I think perhaps justifiably. They give, the president all this authority. And then Obama comes in, and Congress furthers this. After the Iraq War is very unpopular, they go, well, you know what? Actually, you don't need us to vote on whether or not you can conduct airstrikes in Syria or Yemen or Libya. You don't need us. We're not going to cast a vote on that because that could look bad on us because what if this goes poorly, right? You can actually just do it under the authorization of military force in 2001. And so that is what they all use. And I know the last Congress, or no, the 2022 Congress, or no, the 2020 into 2022 Congress, I don't know what number that is, they did take away the Iraq War authorization of military force, which is good. But we still have the drone strike one. We still have the, go do whatever you want one. And I think, to your point, they need to strip that from the executive branch and go back to a regular state of being.
I just personally feel at this point that there's more harm that can come from that than good. I agree. So? I think there was a time where, in a time of war, people tend to like a singular decision maker, right? You put your trust and your confidence, let that person act fast to keep us safe. And I just don't know that the same situation is today. Or maybe we can learn from it and say, okay, I like where that was headed, or I didn't. Times have changed. Let's adjust course as needed. But I think this feeds into some of our other topics today where I've ranted to you recently that I just don't think laws matter anymore in terms of how the government acts. Like, we just do. We just do things. And there's no repercussion. There's no indication that there ever will be. And that makes me nervous. I don't like that. But it seems like that's the case. The next couple things we're going to get into here are a matter of the government just doing something that we thought was at least limited, if not illegal, but it's just happening. And I don't know what to do with that.
So, yeah, they renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. It should be noted that he cannot legally change the name, but this is a nickname. Such a nickname that they're changing, they're rebranding the entire branch. Don't really think that's faithfully executing the laws of the U.S. Congress as he swore on the Bible. Remember when he, on Inauguration Day, this is like such a lib thing to say, so I forgive everyone rolling their eyes. Hope they don't roll out of your head here. But remember when everyone's like flipping out, like Wine Mom Twitter was like, he didn't put his hand on the Bible or whatever. I don't know, man.
I didn't remember that. Okay.
Sometimes I'm like, maybe that was like his little loophole. He's like, well, I didn't actually take the oath. But anyways, they did this rename, and Pete Hegseth says the reason for this is so that other countries are on notice, and that it is. Do we have his actual statement? That sounded like the most cringe slam poetry you've ever seen before in your life. You know the one I'm talking about? Let me find it here, folks. So he goes up there. He's standing behind Trump. You have Dan Raisin Kane up there, who looks like if he could take a cyanide capsule, he probably would in the moment. And so
I want to say I've been impressed with General Kane so far. I feel like he's done a good job.
I do. He seems to be trying his hardest to maintain a nonpartisan or apolitical military that is beloved by all Americans, and he is just losing. But here's what PX has said. He said the reason for the name change is maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Violent effect, not politically correct. We're going to raise up warriors, not just defenders. Okay. All right. Well, that's...
Was that the actual statement? That sounds like a bad rap battle or something.
SNL comes back here soon, so that'll be the cold open for sure. But that is what he said. That first one, though. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. That's
boring ass laws get in the way of killing people, man. Yeah. So frustrating.
So they change it, and now he's Secretary of War, and Trump says that way back in 1947 they went woke and they changed the name from the Department of War to Department of Defense. Now, of course, as I'm sure they teach you in West Point, it was a compromise name, right? Because the Department of War typically meant the Army, and so there was also the Department of the Navy, and they merged them together, right? And that's how you get the Department of Defense. But also, we're not always waging war. We're also defending. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's stupid, to be blunt. Like, I think this is it's just a waste. It doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything. This is like one of those weird marketing things. To me, it feels like we're trying too hard. I don't give a shit what we call it. We can call it the second department, the first department. Kind of Soviet style, right? Like they've got Directorate S, Directorate 2, whatever, all these different things. Like we could have it like that. There's something about when you look at some of the most lethal organizations in the Western world, look at the United States. These are not like Skull Crusher, Special Ops, Night, Death, Widowmakers. Like we don't have these crazy names to try to market how awesome they are. How about the British SAS, Special Air Service?
Yeah.
Those dudes are some badass killers. We've got in the CIA, the Special Activities Division. What the hell do they do? I don't know. They're some of the most elite operators in our country. Go back to World War II if we want to do this. How about the OSS, the precursor to the modern CIA? Like, these are the people jumping into occupied Nazi territory to conduct sabotage operations and help stand up the French resistance. Like, badass across the board. OSS, Office of Strategic Services. I'm more a fan of that. Like, how about Delta? Right now, we think of Delta correctly as this incredible group of lethal badass killers. Their actual name is Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. What the hell is Operational Detachment Delta? That sounds very boring and simple. And I just, like, all of those groups have done an incredible job, have some of the best talent in the world, some of the most elite, lethal operators this world has ever seen, and they managed to do it with some pretty boring names. I just don't know that going from Department of Defense to Department of War, for all of the bureaucratic headaches that is going to include, all of the money spent to change out all these labels, and who knows the degree they're going to have to go to, it doesn't do anything. And it's frustrating that we're spending any time or energy at the highest levels doing that. That's where I sit.
I will say, I think the name's very short-sighted, and I think Hegseth is doing a lot of damage to the military here. I know some people say, well, it doesn't matter, it's just a goofy name change. I do think he is, because number one, the conversation now changes when this appropriations bill arrives in Congress and they have to figure out, whether or not to keep it funded. It's a lot easier to cut war spending than it is to cut defense spending.
That's a good point, yeah.
So that's for sure. So you're probably going to see a budget cut there. But also, I think sends the wrong message. At a time in which the military is being sent into American cities, also into the Department of War, well, so who are you waging war against? I guess Venezuela and Iran, but also maybe D.C., L.A., Chicago, Baltimore, New York, Boston, right? To me, I think it sends the wrong message. And people say, well, it's transparent because this is a War Department, and I think that's a very baby understanding of what the Department of Defense does and U.S. strategy. Because U.S. strategy is to keep the peace. I would compare U.S. strategy up until now was to be a caveman in a cave who kept the peace. Everyone's kind of scared of the guy in the cave, so everyone kind of just follows the rules that they laid out. Because every once in a while, the caveman comes out and he stabs a few people with his spear, and he says, all right, that's enough of that, as you saw in World War II, as you saw in the Global War on Terror, and everyone just goes back to doing what they're supposed to do. That is a Department of Defense. That's like the entire point, is that peace is the highest priority because we don't want to fight the war. That's why we have everything. If we wanted to fight the war, we wouldn't have like a big military and we just build it from scratch every time, right? So I think they are doing long-term damage to the reputation of the military and the strength of it going forward, just because, I mean, maybe the name change doesn't inherently make us weaker, but it does end up having ripple-down effects.
Yeah, I don't think it has any immediate, like, in terms of we're not worse off because of it. We're certainly not better off because of it. It strikes me like the Gulf of America change, where it's like, what happened there? Like, what did we get out of that? A couple maps say Gulf of America, some don't. I still call it Gulf of Mexico because that's what I'd called it for 38 years of my life, and I'm having a hard time changing over. Like, it's that. We added a little bit of confusion. Some people got to wave a flag and say, hell yeah, we did it. But, like, it doesn't change anything at all. I'm just in the camp of, like, the Gulf of Mexico was in zero ways offensive to me. Like, that's just the name of what that place was. And it's the same thing here. Like, the Defense Department, great. If we had never changed it from the War Department, great too. I don't particularly care. It's just the thought that this type of thing makes a material difference or will. I think it's silly and a waste of our time.
Well, I mean,
we have so many other things going on right now. We're talking about the possibility of entering into a larger conflict with cartels off the coast of Venezuela. A few weeks ago, it leaked that the president had authorized or had asked for additional target packets for lethal actions against the cartels in Mexico. Russia-Ukraine, turns out that's still going on. I'm not even sure we're going to talk about that. in today's video. There's so much other stuff happening. China just had their biggest military parade in years. Who do you think they're going to... That military, who's that for? It's for us. Like, I don't... And here we are, like, chiseling letters off of the Pentagon so we can say war instead of defense. Like, get out of here. That needs to be, like, a bottom 10 priority, and we've made it a top 5. I think that's ridiculous.
I mean, well, that's just, like, your opinion. President Trump said yesterday that by changing it to the Department of War, everyone will now be intimidated and respect the United States. I believe that's an exact quote. So, I mean, I don't, it's a name change. It's really gonna change everyone's mind there. It is interesting, though, that they are focused on this instead of, like, I don't know, anything else as you laid out. But it
like
kind
a
of
national
feels
defense
like,
strategy?
oh, so the national defense strategy.
No, I'm not even, I know that's a little bit of a lead in here, but like that,
Yeah. Oh.
that has not come out yet.
So we only have...
That's the type of thing that we need to spend our time on.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And so here's the part that, from what we know with the leak, right, because they leaked part of it, is that the United States is no longer going to try to deter Russia and China, nor compete with them, but rather the U.S. military will now focus on domestic missions and regional missions. Preston Stewart.
I want to interject and not interrupt. That is a different read than I saw.
Okay.
You said not deter and not compete with China and Russia. My understanding was that language was not in there. It's just that the focus shifted to domestic and Western Hemisphere. So it's not that we overtly said we are no longer going to deter Russia and China. We are talking about the leak of a document that has been made public. So I want to take that with a grain of salt.
I think you are right. I think from what I read, perhaps it was the reporter inferring it.
Yep, yes, I can see that. I can see where you get to that point. Yeah.
So yes, I believe you're right. So yeah, they want to focus on the Western Hemisphere and this mysterious phrase, domestic missions. You know what it feels like? I feel like I'm Alex Jones sometimes, right? Because some of this stuff just feels so crazy, and they're just like, no, this is just like how it is, right? What the hell do they mean by domestic missions?
Yeah, I don't like, and I think I've been pretty vocal about this, I don't like the use of our military at home. They're capable of doing a lot of things here. I think they're very well utilized in disaster cleanup, things like that. It's an incredible resource we can tap into, and it's awesome in a sense that people raise their hand. They want to protect not just their country, but their communities and their families at home. And for so long, we've been doing that abroad, and there's a lot of pride in the National Guard, especially when they get called on to help evacuate a flood zone and go in and help rebuild communities in their state. And I think that's a really, really good use of the National Guard. Arguably a better use than securing Sadr City in downtown Baghdad back in the middle of GWAT. I think there's an argument to be made that the National Guard should be used more for domestic emergencies like that. I don't like the idea that our military has a domestic mission, though, because the emergencies are kind of contingency operations, right? The hurricane pops up, we send people out. The idea that part of our national defense strategy has to do with military operations at home makes me nervous. It's possible they limit that to, air defense, like talking about, again, complete speculation here, but that's focused more on the Golden Dome project and focused on border security. That would be kind of the limits of if that is what the focus was here, it wouldn't be nearly as concerning. I understand both of those mission sets and can make arguments for them. The challenge here is it comes amidst the conversation that the president is considering sending troops into other cities around the country. So the timing there, you can't help but think of that.
Without a doubt, it makes me very nervous because I know what the game plan is. Project 2025, which is their whole governing thing, is to keep the military deployed in the streets, use it as law enforcement, yada, 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 use it to affect elections, impact them. The fact that they're going through with it, and I kind of thought going into this presidency that not like the deep state, but like the career civil servants would save us, but they all just get fired now. You know, you even look at Pete Hegseth the wrong way, I mean, you get fired. So, domestic missions fills me with nothing but a pit in my stomach as to what they're planning, what they think they need to do. It seems ludicrous to me.
Well, we'll see what that national defense strategy actually says when it comes out. Again, no national defense strategy, national military strategy, none of that has made its way into the light of day, which that's what the SecDef should be doing and putting his time into. That stuff there. If we're talking about a change in focus, a change in strategy, even a reallocation of resources, it's that. That is the framework that we operate off of. And they're doing it. It's not like it's some crazy woke idea that nobody wants to do. It is their policy. They're the ones that do it. Like, this is the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. He gets to put this together. Like, and he's not doing it. So this gray area of they're saying certain things. We should have this in writing so we kind of understand and how we can allocate resources appropriately or not. And it's just not there. The boring government stuff. And I get it. It is boring. It's boring to read. But I think it's an important thing.
Wouldn't you like to live a day as Pete Hegseth? You wake up in the morning. Your assistant brings you a shot. Then you get to go to the Pentagon, and you get to go on TV for like 4 hours. Then you get to go talk to this senile old man and just be like, oh, yes, sir, we'll rename it the Department of War, and we'll carpet bomb St. Louis. You know, whatever. Yes, sir, whatever you want to do. And then, you know, I don't know, you order some random boat to be blown up in Venezuela, and you get to post it and look tough, and then you get to go back on cable news. And then, meanwhile, you get to check out at the night at the bar and maybe go home and allegedly, domestic violence your family. Allegedly.
Yeah, don't hold back.
It is like, you know, what a life he lives. But speaking of people who belong in the Legion of Doom, let's talk about the Legion of Doom. So Xi, Putin, Kim Jong-un, and, very few people have, I don't want to be rude to him, but very few people have a physique that looks like you could roll him down a hill. But Kim Jong-un does, okay? He does. All right, you send that guy in the winter, he's going to come out looking like a snowman. But he was also there joined by Modi. So, the Legion of Doom met. Trump said they were conspiring against the United States. Correct. And I think, good one, Don. And they discussed a lot of things. They're caught in a hot mic talking about living up to 150 years with organ transplants. I think a lot of people are like, whoa, what does that mean? I just take it as delusional dictator rambling. That's kind of, everyone just says yes, sir to them. So, of course, they just go along with it, think it's real. But yeah, so they met, they conspired, and India fully embraced by China, fully embraced by Russia, and Modi continues to give the finger to Trump. Allegedly, the break between India and the United States, which we have been trying for 20 years now to build this relationship. We've been trying to get very tight with India. I mean, we sacrificed the war in Afghanistan, and we gave all the construction contracts initially to Indian companies in hopes to, gain that, grow that relationship. And all it did is it just made Pakistan fund the Taliban, right? But that was something we were willing to do to try to grow this relationship. And now it seems to be gone, and it allegedly is because Trump asked Modi to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and Modi said no. I should say allegedly. I've only seen that reported, so don't sue me, Mr. Trump, but that is supposedly what happened. And now we're cutting Indian immigrant visas. He signed an executive order penalizing companies who use Indian IT workers. He's trying to curtail H-1B visas to Indian software engineers. So India has been fully embraced by the Legion of Doom and has now become the fourth member there. What do you think of this? What do you make? What does the stew think here?
I was surprised to see Doug the Pug make an appearance during all of that. I shouldn't be shocked, but that's the company he keeps. So being walked right down that red carpet between Putin and Xi, which was just disgusting in so many ways. It's frustrating, man, because I feel like for my entire life, there's always been this balance, whether you call it competition or what's I'm mixing it up here, adversarial or competition, whatever you look at it, between the United States and China, the United States and Russia. And the advantage we've always had when looking at any country like India, where they're choosing, right? I mean, how long has it been where the conversation has been, are they going to buy the S-400 or S-300 or the Patriot, right? Are they going to buy the Russian jet or the U.S. F-35 or F-22 or F-16? Like, it's very clear with our military sales. Like, we're trying to draw this line, and we've had this advantage of Russia and China are so sketchy of partners and so overhanded that we have some wiggle room to maybe jack up prices or ask things of our partners or really kind of force them to go our way in one way or another. It seems like what we're seeing right now is that is becoming more and more even, to where a country like India does not necessarily look at the United States as the clear-cut favorite for an ally. I hate that. I don't know. I think there's probably a good argument to be made that we would still be a good ally long term, but it does seem like it's gotten that we've narrowed that gap, and it's a smart move, especially for China. I think Russia's lost a lot of influence on the world stage, and more right now than ever is really just kind of like one of China's vassal states in a way. So it's not necessarily the India-Russia relationship I'm worried about, but China, if they were smart, and it looks like what they've been doing, is anytime we kind of shun an ally or a potential ally, China's there to step in behind us and say, we just won't do that thing. And it becomes a very clear choice for some of these countries, and I hate it, and I hope it's short term, but these relationships tend to be much longer in duration than a 4-year term of office.
I agree. And what's interesting is, with democratic countries, these relationships exist beyond the leaders, right? The countries where the relationships depend on the leaders are autocracies, dictatorships. And I'm not calling Modi a dictator. I think he is a wannabe autocrat, but I would not call him a dictator. The fact that he was able to fall out with Trump over that, says a lot about the two of them. But, I mean, to blow it up like that is crazy. And you're right. We've kind of given up all our advantages to China on there. So it is concerning. It is hard to see if we can bounce back, given that India's entire foreign policy is that we were colonized once and we don't want anyone else to be colonized, right? So that is like their whole thing. Opposition to the West on the basis of not wanting to be colonized, but also opposition in the East to those who try to tell them what to do. And the United States somehow seemed to come in trying to do both and got slapped down. And so I don't know. I don't know if there is a way back here. I mean, I hope that continual immigration, if they allow that, from India into the United States, because all the smartest people in India, where do they live? They live in New York. They live in Chicago. They don't live in Mumbai, So hopefully that can swing us back. But I don't know. I fear that we have lost India. India has fallen. So we will see.
One of the challenges we talk about with tariffs is the up, down, sideways, how they change every day, and it's very hard for a business to plan long term when they don't know their cost of goods next week, let alone next month or next year. And I think we overlook that with countries, where a country like India, you just labeled all of the new things that Trump layered on them, all these additional restrictions. And like, if we just go back a month or two, they didn't have tariffs. Now they have tariffs. Now they have double the tariffs. I don't think it's crazy for India to look at that and say, this is unpredictable. We cannot operate and plan going forward with an unpredictable partner. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. But for all of the changes in policy, there's a receiving end of that. And if they see a better option, they're going to take it. And I'm a little bit nervous that's what we're seeing here.
I fully agree. The tariff, especially because those restrictions are not in response to a dispute between our nations, but a dispute between the Indian leader and the president, right? Which is always like, what's that Kissinger quote I love to say all the time? It's that a leader seeks for salvation in the afterlife, but the state is immortal, right? This is the whole thing, that the state's supposed to have independent interests of the leader, and the leader is supposed to pursue those. That is kind of like big violation of that, right? So you're right, India is looking elsewhere. They're embracing their arch enemy, China, and that's a tough look for us. And got to be wondering at these tariffs. I mean, if you're India, you're looking, you say, we have all these tariffs. China doesn't have any, or barely any, you know? You're right. There's like, you're supposedly trying to court us, yet China has barely any tariffs. So, what's going on there? Yeah, this is a bad show for us, and hopefully this is not long lasting. You know, sometimes like people fight and then they're like closer afterwards. Maybe he's trying that. Probably not, but
I don't know. It's optimistic.
Inshallah, right? Yeah. So, Preston, do we have any other thoughts on Legion of Doom? Oh, wait, you want to talk about this North Korean Navy SEAL raid?
Not yet, because I haven't read enough about it.
Okay.
But at a high level, it looks like there was a botched mission into North Korea. Navy SEALs killed some civilians when they were trying to were compromised while they were trying to plant some sort of reconnaissance device, listening device, something of that sort. But I haven't dug into it quite yet.
I don't know if I'm skeptical that's true because I haven't heard it on a podcast yet. So, or in a book, so usually
that's how you know it didn't go well. If it went well, the SEALs would be out there writing the books already.
Oh, absolutely. So, speaking of Legion of Doom, Greg Abbott, the Texas Guard, is supposedly staging for an invasion of Illinois. And I use the word invasion because they are not being federalized. They're unfederalized, being used under this 2006 law that's like National Guard from other states can assist federal operations with the consent of that governor in another state to do law enforcement if all parties agree to do so. Well, Governor Pritzker has not agreed to do so, and yet Greg Abbott will control the Texas Guard and supposedly lead them into an invasion of Illinois, and so Trump will not control the Texas Guard. Greg Abbott will, the governor of Texas. And this has made a lot of people upset. So upset that the people of Illinois and Chicago have seemingly dropped their objection to ICE, because that was like the whole thing is ICE is coming here and people are kind of upset about that. But then when it was found out that, Greg Abbott could be coming with his, I should say I'm a bit partial on this one given that I live here, coming here with his goons and his loser jabroni boys. So, it's, I don't know who Greg Abbott thinks he is, and I don't know why they think it's a good idea to send them here under the control of another governor. And the reason they want to do that is supposedly so they can do law enforcement, right? Because they're federalized, they can't because of posse comitatus. And so he's deploying his forces here. Now, I've spoken to some state attorneys in Illinois. Some people work for the government here. Other people just, sourced in reporters. And they say if this happens the way it is, and now I should say, the government, Trump, Vance, currently claims that they do not have any plans to immediately deploy the Guard, even though Trump keeps saying we're going in. But the Guard is staging, and they say, well, if they arrive and they're not federalized, they'll be arrested and removed. And if all else fails, then they'll take the Illinois Guard. The part that I think is provocative that I should mention here is that the Illinois Guard is not being federalized. When you federalize the state's Guard and you bring them in, that's different. Those are boys from Chicago. Those are boys from Schaumburg and Naperville and Evanston and Joliet and Aurora and Downers Grove and Tinley Park who are coming into their own communities, and it kind of helps things go a lot easier, right? If they're going to be out there, let it be our boys. But instead, they got these dorks from Texas coming up here who no one wants them here. So I say if you have to bring the Guard, use our guys. Why are you doing this? What do you think about this? This is pretty crazy. I don't think this has ever happened in American history.
Yeah, don't like it. We need to I think that is a horrible precedent if the president essentially directs one state to move their military forces into another state against their will. I don't think there's a scenario where like that works out well for the United States long term. So that said, I think we need to focus the frustration and the conversation there at the head. So this is Governor Abbott's decision. Seemingly, my guess is there's probably some prodding from the White House, but I wouldn't get to the point quite yet of calling the guys goons there, the Texas goons. These are they're still Americans. They're a lot of them are going to be in a tough spot, I imagine, doing what they can to make sure they're following legal orders. And look, we're not going to be able to look at the thing in California a few months ago. That had to go before the Supreme Court before it was determined what was and was not legal. The soldiers on the ground don't have better insight into this than the courts. So we're asking them they're in a very difficult spot of, for a lot of them, this could be there's full-time in the National Guard. Plenty of others, their income from the National Guard helps keep them afloat month to month. And for a bunch of them, access to military health care through their time in the Guard is providing for their families, helping provide for their families. So for a lot of them, they have to weigh that versus, is it okay to do this or not? And if they say, I'm going to sit this out because I think this is illegal, and then the court comes back and says it's totally legal, they could get kicked out. So they're in a bad spot right now. And I hate that because they're being taken advantage of in a sense. But I really hope this gets shot down before any Texas soldiers step foot in Illinois. I just don't think there's any positive that comes out of that.
I should say, yes, shame on Abbott and Trump for even considering putting them in this position. If there is any saving grace for Illinois, and I guess I apologize for my harsh rhetoric on the Texas Guard, but if there is any consolidation for Illinois, it is that all of Texan history is a bunch of times they almost won and then lost. The Alamo didn't win. Dallas Cowboys never win. Just like the Civil War, they didn't even get close that time. So that's kind of all of Texas history. So if there's any consolidation, ultimately Illinois prevail because Illinois has never lost, baby. 2-0.
So guess we'll go ahead and cancel that Texas live tour, huh? Jesus, Ben.
Look, I have love for the people of Texas, and I hope that Governor Pritzker liberates them if they come here. But I should say this. There is a town in Texas called Ben Wheeler, Texas.
It's true, yeah.
Outside of Dallas. And they have a feral hog festival at the end of October every year. If the Texas Guard doesn't get deployed here, I think we should go.
Okay.
And I think when I arrive, it's going to be like Jesus on Palm Sunday. You know how everyone's like freaking out? That
probably
sounds crazy, but at the same time, I bet they've never had anyone named Ben Wheeler arrive in Ben Wheeler, Texas.
It's a pretty unique name, yeah.
It is. So I have love for the people of Ben Wheeler, Texas. So I hopefully I don't offend anyone with my harsh rhetoric, and I guess I apologize as a whole, a little bit. But anyway, so questions. So we have questions. People have a lot of questions. We put out this thing. We ask for the questions, and they send them. A lot of people, though, making fun of you for losing to Doug the Pug. And I thought that was very rude. So
did you stand up for me, or what do you do with that?
I don't reply. I don't reply in the questions post. I was thinking about making it like a banned word,
Yeah, that's good. Let's come up with any words that could hurt feelings, my feelings.
Doug the Pug, for one. Yes. So, question number 1. I have noticed in coverage of Russia's invasion of Ukraine compared to coverage of Israel and Palestine that with Russia-Ukraine, the coverage draws a clear line between what is being done and the objectives behind it. But with Israel-Gaza, we don't really get that link. We know what the sides say they want. We get reports on what they're doing, but the link between the two and the analysis of it isn't presented. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah. So speaking for myself personally, there, the Russia-Ukraine war is easy in the sense that it is a war between two combatants, and the goals, while people disagree on them, tend to be pretty clearly stated by both Ukraine and Russia, and it's pretty easy to follow when something aligns with those goals. It could further those goals, or it doesn't. With Israel and Gaza, it's a mess, man. First off, the information space is just incredibly dirty. There's examples where a story will come out, describe it in operation. It'll be the complete opposite will be told 24 hours later, and then it'll be spun again at 48 hours, and finally again at 72. And by the time you get to that 72-hour mark, there's something new in the news cycle. So there's a challenge in lining up actions to objectives when the story of those actions changes 3 times. So, like, which one do you go off of? That's a challenge I've had, because if you cherry pick one of those, it may or may not line up with the overall objectives for Israel or for Hamas. But I have less and less faith that the story we hear at the 6 and 12 and 24-hour mark is the full story. So that's part of the challenge. It's, for any number of reasons, much cleaner with Ukraine and Russia. Another issue here is, and there's a lot of pushback in Israel, that their goals, their operations on the ground do not match their strategic goals. It has matched in regards to Hezbollah, Iran, I would even argue the Houthis and Assad in Syria and a lot of those militias there. You can line up Israeli actions and point to the elimination of Hezbollah as a near-term threat on Israel's northern border. The going after some of their senior leadership, precision strikes in Beirut to kill Hassan Nasrallah, all sorts of things like that that very much match what Israel's trying to do. That is not present in Gaza. It is very hard to, and some of the arguments right now against Netanyahu and the ruling party in Israel is, you're just doing the same thing. They have rescued alive, 4 hostages? 4 or 5? It's small, the number that they have forcibly gone in and extracted hostages against Hamas's will. There's been a lot more exchanged in those agreements, but if one of the stated goals is to get all the hostages back, we're not seeing a change in policy. They're just fighting harder and fighting more. And there's no indication that this next operation that has already begun into Gaza City is going to get the hostages out. So, a couple of reasons to circle back to the question. First off, the story as to what happened changes so drastically day to day that it's hard to point decisively to it lining up with an end state or an objective. The second one is, if you see a gap between Israeli actions in Gaza and their strategic objectives, you're correct. And I think that a lot of people are pointing to that as well. So not every action they take, not by a long shot, is clearly moving the ball towards the recovery of the hostages and the elimination of Hamas.
Very well stated. Next question. Why is the Israeli-Gaza conflict so polarizing compared to the Ukrainian war? Is it the heavy nuance to understand generational tensions, whereas the Ukrainian war is more black and white? Also add that identity politics plays a role in driving the narrative on both sides of the conflict.
Why don't you take this? I'm interested in your thoughts here, and then I'll chime in.
So I think they are objectively different conflicts. Ukraine was minding its own business, and then Big Satan, Russia, and Vladimir Putin does go and invades them over the course of 10 years. So what we saw in 2022 is the renewed invasion of Ukraine, right? That is pretty black and white, right? In a way you haven't really seen since Saddam invaded Kuwait. With Israel-Gaza, now what's happening, perhaps Israel is going too far now. But it is important to remember that Israel was subjected to the 3rd largest terrorist attack in human history. And so that the Israeli response is a response to that. And so the debates that evolve around Israel-Gaza are reminiscent of our debates that we had in the United States, reminiscent around Afghanistan, the global war on terror. Whereas the other one is just, you can just look at it and go, all right, everyone who's ever annexed territory, invaded, Hitler, Saddam, Vladimir Putin. Boom. That's easy. Everyone can understand that. It's black and white. As for Israel-Gaza, it is, you're right, there's generational tensions. There was a terror attack that precipitated this, and now perhaps the shoe is on the other foot, and Israel is now going way too far with Gaza. And so that kind of nuance, I think, is it's not hard for people to understand, but if you're not involved in this thing day to day and you just kind of tune in every once in a while, I think that is a complication that is hard to follow And so, therefore, the only voices you hear are the ones who feel the most passionate about it.
I think we also are at ground zero in the information war here in the United States when it comes to Israel-Gaza in a way that other places around the world are not. So my parents just got back from Europe, and they sent me a bunch of pictures from a couple different events they went to, and there were Ukrainian flags all over the place. Like the Ukrainian marching band going down the street one night. Like, what? It's September 2025, and there's just like random big support for Ukraine popping out of left field. That conflict is much closer in Europe. And I think there's stronger ties, stronger emotions in Europe around that. That's not the case here. And when you look at the information war, I just think, no doubt the United States is Israel's closest and longest ally. And I think that opens us up for information operations in all directions. We have a very passionate Israeli base here in the United States. Some are Israeli, some are not. They're just supporters of Israel. That exists. And at the same time, I think there's been a concerted push to counter that over the years. And some of it is just the normal geopolitics, in a sense, countering influence. But I think what we see is a higher willingness for large voices and traditional outlets to share information that ends up being verifiably false within a very short period of time. We don't see that as much with Russia and Ukraine. A little bit at the beginning of the war, but today, I don't know the last time the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal reported something that 24 hours later we were like, that was just completely made up. That was straight Russian propaganda that you recited. We don't see that as much. But it is almost a daily occurrence where a major publication will run with a story that within a week is proven to be based on very little to no information, and they need to issue a retraction. So I think we are kind of right in the middle of the information war, so we see a lot more of those divisions than maybe someone else anywhere around the world might see.
Yeah, I would agree. This next one is, if the U.S. wants to remove Nicolas Maduro so bad, why don't they just drop a hellfire delete button on the palace and be done with it? Go ahead.
So I had a good talk yesterday with Juan Gonzalez. He was a former National Security Council staffer. We just published the interview. And he spent a lot of time focused on the Western Hemisphere and a lot of time focused on Venezuela. And he made some good points of, we don't know exactly what comes next. So there is an opposition in Venezuela, but Maduro has also, he's standard dictator, right? The people that are lined up behind Maduro are there because he has put them in place and has provided a lot of perks. And they have a very robust state security system watching over those people. So we can eliminate Maduro. That may or may not resolve any sort of issues. Remember, before Maduro, we had Chavez. He wasn't exactly a shining light of U.S. allies. So it's not clear exactly what would... The opposition party is there, but there's no indication that they would be able to necessarily take power. So if we take out Maduro, we've just understandably frustrated Venezuela and probably some other countries in the region. And he might just have somebody very similar to him stepping in, taking over the reins, and doing the same thing that's happening now. So I think the issue there is it's bigger than him. He's the head figure, but the rot runs deeper than just with Maduro, I would say.
Yeah, I would also say, that is, if you kill another country's leader, you open
there's
yourself up.
There's that dynamic too of just randomly assassinating.
That is we were talking earlier at the very beginning about rogue state behavior. That is, there's really,
we got to at least pretend it's not us. Yeah.
Yeah, there's really no coming back from that one. This last one here. When will Ben sail on a flotilla for the injustice of the Tennessee influencer contest election rigging?
You got one of my alts. Good.
Okay. So I'm assembling a crew, and we're going to sail down the Mississippi, and we're going to march on the Tennessean. I think that's not a bad idea. Gretchen Thunberg will be with me. And
we're back. All right.
Yeah, who else is going to be on this flotilla? Gretchen Thunberg? What's her name? Greta Thunberg. That's her name, right? She was on the one to Israel.
I think she's on another one to Israel right now. Aren't they
really?
doing that again? They're doing another one. Yeah.
Does she have a job? What is she just
she
rides
sails,
the boat?
She sails to Gaza. Yeah.
Wait. So they just have these going 24/7.
I don't know. I thought I saw something that it was happening again. It is the most predictable outcome every time. Like, I think they've only done one or two of these. They did one up on the Egyptian border, and like, I can appreciate people being passionate about a cause and wanting to do something, but like, this is like announcing I'm going to the White House to bang on the door and tackle Trump to the ground until something changes. And like, I live blog it the whole way there. And then I get to the White House and I jump over the fence and I get tackled. Like, what do you think is going to happen? That's what's going to happen. And it's going to be the same thing again here. The Israeli Navy will intercept them. They will do so in a non-lethal manner, and they will move them off to somewhere else.
Do you think, like, when they get on the boat, one of the soldiers is like, "Hi, Greta." She's like, "Hey, Dave." Like, you think they're acquainted at this point?
Welcome back.
Yeah,
do we have to do this again? Yeah.
That is so. Do you remember when the flotilla first arrived and they were convinced that the Israeli Navy was going to sink them or kill them? And then what did they do? They arrested them, put them on a plane, and sent them home.
Gave them food because they were running low on food, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Fed them. Bought them a plane ticket.
One of these days they're going to get through. But what happens if they get to Gaza? What happens if the flotilla does land in Gaza then? What then?
Probably get some good photo ops. I don't know. I assume they have some supplies on there. No doubt the amount of supplies that they have on their boat is a fraction of what's coming over the border each day in those trucks. Just costs a lot more money with a lot more fanfare. And then, I don't know, they're just in Gaza for a period of time. I don't know how they're getting out of there.
When we say flotilla, what I have in mind and what I have assembled is like a pontoon boat, kind of.
That's it?
What are they? I assume they must have like a real sailboat, right?
Oh, let's see. French actress Adele Haenel joins Adele Haenel. I don't know. Is that the same person?
Oh, that's not Adele.
Set sail for the Gaza Strip from Tunis aboard the Global Sumid Flotilla. I don't know what that means, though. I don't know how big those are.
I tell you what, the Israeli Navy might sink it if Adele, like our Adele, gets on.
Oh, there's
a flotilla
tracker
coming there because that lady, she can set fire to the rain. So
they have an Instagram page with 1 million followers for this flotilla.
It doesn't surprise me. The flotillas are big, and I've always kind of been confused as to why. But they must take off from what, Italy, or like one of the French islands?
I guess.
I mean, they must make a lot of money fundraising.
There's got to, yeah. You'd have to have a lot of fundraising or donors pitching in to keep this thing going. I would think. I don't know. I see a bunch of sailboats, is what I see. So who knows?
There was I read an interesting article about 2 years ago about the issue on the left with the Omicause, I don't know, about how Greta has now taken climate change and she's mushing it in with Palestine, and then here in America they've done the same. Climate change mushed in with Palestine, mushed in with like equal rights and pronouns and all this other stuff, and they're like, this doesn't go well, because then if you don't agree with everything in the Omicause, then you're cast out of it, and then your coalition gets smaller and smaller and smaller. There's like Greta's screwing up. It was from like a German paper. It was interesting, but I think that's all our questions for the day, unless you have any questions for me.
Yeah, just keep me up to date on the flotilla coming down the Mississippi. Looking forward to seeing you.
Will you rescue me if I start drowning? I mean, I kind of don't do boats. I've never been like a big boat guy.
Can you swim?
I can swim, yeah.
Okay, you'll be fine.
Yeah, but like I mean, are you a boat guy?
No, but I'm busy. The day that you're here doing the thing, I'm busy that day.
Oh, okay. That works, yeah. All right, everyone. Well, we'll see you next week. I'll be on my flotilla with Adele, and Greta Thunberg, and the Texas National Guard, who will be escorting us down. All right, later, guys.